Carly, I'm so excited to have you here. When I woke up in the emergency room and like knew I needed to get my life together, the very first thing was like decluttering our house. Our house was so unorganized, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to figure out like who I am as a human, I first need to have my space not feel so chaotic.
Hmm.
And I did not know how to get started. And I know you resonate with the term like former hot mess to home organizer. So I would
100.
love for you to just like bring us up to like how did you go from that to being a home organizer?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey. I'm really excited to be here and hopefully share some tips that people can take away. But yeah, I absolutely resonate with Hot Mess Express. My life used to be, I just say like chronically disorganized because it was every aspect of my life. My finances were just awful. Just awful. I was really in debt. I mean, student loans, but then also, credit card debt. And I didn't have any systems in place of making sure that things got paid on time. So I had a
Yeah.
lot of stress about like where my bank account was because I was always terrified to look. The mail came. Was just sick to my stomach. And then at home, I didn't have any systems. So I was losing things. I was having to rebuy them. I was spending a lot of money on things that I didn't really need to because I already had 25,000 lip glosses. I didn't need an extra one. Um, just the list went on and on. And there are so many things in my life that have changed now. Something that I talk about all the time that just resonates with me every single day on why the change has just helped my life so much is even getting ready in the morning. I used to spend like 45 minutes getting ready, had, the closet full of nothing to wear. And it was just a really stressful thing every day, figuring out what I was going to wear. After I decluttered, my morning is more like top, bottom, go, top, bottom, go, because everything
Yeah.
works and it's streamlined. And I'm looking at the things that fit me this season and are, good for the temperature it is outside. So in ways that are big and small, things have just been streamlined so that there's less stress in my life because
Hmm.
that's the overall thing is that disorganization can just be very stressful and getting simple strategies in place to streamline your life will just overall reduce your anxiety and your stress levels and that's why I do what I do because it changed my life completely.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about that it's not just like the stuff in our house. Like that's a huge part of it, but it's also how you show up in your clothes, how you show like picking your clothes, your mental organization, also your finances, having that organized. It's not just the stuff in your house, but it's just like how you show up. And, for a long time, like, especially when I stepped into parenting, I would tell people, I am not the minimalist mom. I'm the mom that has this, has these things. And I think there's a really fine balance. Like there is certain things that I love having, knowing I have a solution to whatever situation I'm going to find myself in. But I definitely have teeter tottered in the past on having too much where it becomes stressful. And
Mm-hmm.
you just can't be peaceful. You can't be your best self. You can't accomplish the things you want to do in a day when you are just surrounded by stuff. And one thing that was really impactful for me was to learn the difference between decluttering versus organizing. And so I'd love
Mm-hmm.
for you to kind of debunk that and talk about like that organizing is not decluttering. And while they both have a little bit of value, they're not the same thing.
Absolutely. So it's a hand in hand situation, 100%. But I like to say that I approach organization with decluttering as the foundation of everything that I do. Because what I found is it's twofold. One, if you just organize your stuff, and I mean, you could categorize it, you could put it in pretty bins, you could slap a label on it. Technically, everything's organized. It's beautiful. You can get that Pinterest perfect, whatever room you're looking at, but you're still going to be wading through too much stuff day in, day out. So, what I always suggest to people is that we are approaching any space looking at what you use, want, need, and love. And those are the
Mm.
the ways that we're thinking about what to keep, what to not. And the second half of it too is that like when I'm looking at a space, when I first became an organizer, I felt all this internal pressure to look at a space and like have a solution in my mind. I wanted to be like the most original thing anyone had ever seen. And what I realized over time quickly is that there was no point in making a plan when I looked at a space because we hadn't realized and chatted through what was important and what was not. And if I'm just looking at a space and making a plan off of that, I will be wrong 100% of the time because I'm not taking into
Mm.
consideration the client needs. We haven't chatted through it yet. I'll give one example, totally illustrates it, but this is something I talk about all the time. Had a client and she had a guest closet that we needed to get organized. And when we opened it up, it was filled with beautiful leather bags. She bought beautiful leather bags like when she would go abroad. She loved shopping for them and she had this beautiful collection. But as we chatted through it, she realized that it turns out she doesn't like using fine leather goods. She likes buying fine leather goods. That's where the joy comes in. And she was like, okay, actually, I don't need like most of these. So we kept maybe 5 of like 25, and she
Wow.
gifted a bunch to her friends. It's something else that she loves to do is like spend time with her friends, gift her friends things. We donated a bunch to a women's organization, and she had all this extra room. So if you're overwhelmed with too much stuff, the first thing that you can do is figure out what you don't use, want, need, and love. And that's going to clear up some space for the things that you do and for what's important. So after we figure out what that is and what it isn't, then from there, we're creating solutions that are a lot more simple than if I had just walked in and like assumed on the front end.
Yeah. And I love that it's redefining what the purpose of that item was in the sense of like, did it serve its value? Because her joy and her, ability to see out the life of that bag for her was buying it and then maybe
Mm-hmm.
gifting it or giving it to a friend, where it doesn't mean you have to get your value out of it. Like, you define like what that value is. And as someone that grew up like working really hard and really trying to find ways to create more money and really find meaning in my stuff. Like, I grew up in a house that had too much stuff for sure, but it was like, hey, the value of this, or are you ever going to need it? And different things like that. I think allowing yourself to kind of have permission that your definition of the purpose of that item may be different than when you bought it, but also what someone
Mm-hmm.
else sees. So if you
Yep.
say, hey, I bought this bag, and someone else is like, well, that's an expensive bag, and you're like, yeah, but I just wanted to buy it and then I want to gift it to someone, like, you kind of have to give yourself permission for that. And like, there's probably real like therapy and trauma and things that people can work through for their items, but as an organizer, what are some of the ways that you support this transition of like the meaning that that item has served in that person's life?
I think that it's so important, first and foremost, to listen to what my clients say and to give them, to your point, the space and the permission to chat through things, because not everything is going to be cut and dry, and it's not necessarily just like keep or not, keep or not. People need to talk through things frequently, and it's interesting because they'll start talking through it and they'll say, sorry, I just needed to talk through that. I'm like, no, you're fine. This is literally what I do.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of items, I know we'll get into this a little bit more too, where people have been keeping them but don't realize it out of guilt and obligation. And those deep down are the feelings of why
Mm.
they're keeping it. If you give somebody permission, like if I say, this is verbatim what I say to clients a lot. If I tell you that it's fine to let this go, do you want to keep it? And they're like, no. Great, let's let it go. You don't have to keep it. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, yeah, let's get rid of it. And when you give people that permission, when you give them the space to talk through it, you're able to get to the core of what somebody wants versus what's kind of been put on them by
Mm.
maybe circumstance or society or their mother-in-law or whatever. And so
Yeah.
chatting through it is it's really important, and it can be, I've had people say things and all organizers have, but like, oh, this is cheaper than marriage counseling. It's like, yeah, man, it is.
I think that decluttering in people's space is so tied to our mental well-being and our relationships and so much that I could totally see that. It truly is like a cleansing process.
Hmm.
And you were kind of touching on this that there are some things that make that extra difficult. If things have sentimental value, if they've been passed down, you're honoring the history or the family, but you also want to honor yourself. Like, what are some ways to deal with that? Because you can't, I'll give you a tangible example in my life. Like I've sat down with my mom and I've been like, Mom, I understand that you have 3 sets of china that you think you're giving me, but I do not need 3 sets of china. And I have to find a way to have that be a solution and work through things where I'm not going to have 3 sets of china in my house. I just can't do that for my mental well-being. But
Yeah.
she has a sentimental value with this and she wants me to, right? She wants, and we've worked through it for us, but that's an example of things that show up in so many people's lives. So how do you honor your family with certain things, but also not let it weigh you down?
Yeah. I absolutely suggest to folks when they're in that situation where they can be potentially inheriting things in the future, whether you're thinking long term down the road or whether you're facing a, a situation in the moment, I really recommend people tap into those 4 words again: use, want, need, or love. Like, are you actually going to use it? Do you even want it? Like, is this something that is important to you? When my grandmother passed away, she had a bedroom set that had a lot of sentimental value for me just because, it was the one that she had my entire life and it made me, really happy looking at it. And at the time that she passed, I lived in a 1 bedroom apartment and I was hoping they were asking people if they cared about any furniture after she passed. And I said, I'm really hoping to get the tall dresser from her bedroom set. And my parents were like, well, it is a full set. So we could hold on to the rest of it. And then when you have a larger place, then you could take the full set. I was like, I really appreciate that. But I actually do not want the full set. Like, I'm never going to want a full set. It's also just not my style. Like,
Yeah.
would love that one piece. And they're like, but it is a full set. And I said, okay, then never mind. Totally understand, but it's all good. I just want the one piece. We ended up working
Yeah.
it out. I do have the one piece. We were able to find a beautiful home for the rest of it. But boundaries are really part of that too. And I have met so many people who have had multiple folks in their life pass away, maybe in like quick succession. And then they have 2 to 3 times the amount of furniture that they need in their home, like at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very stressful. Like, it's very stressful to have way too much furniture in your living space, especially over a long period of time. And I also meet a lot of people who have storage units that they just have indefinitely, or garages filled with furniture that they actually are never going to use because they have a household filled with furniture already and there's no intention of ever using it. But it was so and so. So it's really important that we keep it. But the for why? What is the point? Like, getting to the point of why we're holding on to it and what, like, and then what? Those are questions that are important to ask because
Yeah.
while maybe if you're in this transition of somebody passing, you're inheriting a lot of items, maybe a storage unit is the right thing right now while you're in the midst of grieving, while you're in the throes of it, while you're doing all the planning. I'm not against it if you are able to also set a deadline, add it to your calendar, circle back. It could be a year from now. That's okay. But make sure that you are circling back and reevaluating, saying, okay, now that we have a little bit of distance, let's make a plan. Because if
Mm-hmm.
the plan is spend $20,000 over the course of the next decade or so on a storage unit for things that you never touch, like, just think about that. If that's the plan and you're loving the plan, go for it. But if that doesn't sound great to you and you want another way, then it's going to be time to reevaluate what you're keeping, what you're not. And it's hard. Those are the hardest items to chat through, but the chatting through it is really important because just like therapy, that's what's going to take you to the other side of the situation.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about the plan because if it just sits there, like you're not really honoring that piece, right? And if you need some time to grieve and process and then be like, okay, do I want to choose that bed or do I want to choose the bed I already had? And
Yeah.
be able to pick one or the other. But then once you pick, you let it have another life somewhere else because
Yes.
then it's able to actually be loved and not just sit in a storage unit somewhere. Someone is going to love that piece of furniture and they're
Mm-hmm.
scouring Facebook Marketplace right now for that specific piece, and you get to give that piece another life. And I think that's so beautiful. I was actually just in an event this last weekend, and one of the speakers was talking about how when we choose how we're going to live our life and just living yourself full out, she's like, I like to envision the fact that my ancestors aren't looking down and aren't like, you know what? I hope Crystal has a mediocre life. I hope she just kind of like gets by. She was like, I hope my ancestors are sitting up there and they're like, you go, girl, like you live it up, you do this. And I think it's the same thing when we think about the things that have been passed down. Like, I don't think my great grandmother is like, Kelsey, I hope that you're extremely stressed out and you just keep my china
Yes.
and you keep that in your house no matter how stressed you are with your stuff. She's probably like, I don't even know how I got that china. And like, honestly, it doesn't even really matter to me. And you should give it to
Yeah.
someone else to play with or use someone that's excited about it. I think like we create these scenarios that someone else is like, you must keep those things. And it's probably not true most of the time.
100%. And I say that all the time. Like that's a perfect example, especially with gift giving, because when we accept a gift internally, especially the closer the person is, the more we internalize story that doesn't exist. And the story is, someone gifts it to you and they're like, here is this gift. And now you must keep it until the day you die, or else you don't love me. And like that's not no one does that. Maybe one
Yeah.
person does that, but it's no good. Like but like but that's not a thing. No one's giving you like a $5 scarf from Target for Christmas as a stocking stuffer in with the determination that you must keep that for the rest of your life. If it's not serving you, here is your permission slip. You can let it go. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on boundaries. I want to bring that back for a second because there's boundaries about the after the fact or receiving things. And then there's the boundaries of once you receive those gifts, like you're talking about. And this is huge for moms, right? Because it is one thing for me to let go of my stuff and explain like why that's not a part of my life. But our community really struggles with this when it's things for our kids, like those
Mm-hmm.
grandparents that are bringing, and this is a really hard conversation too with gratitude and blessings
Yes.
because if you're in a position that you're receiving things for your children, like we're all very grateful for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is an amazing opportunity that people are loving on our little humans so much that they're bringing things to our kids and our family and they want to do that. But as a mom that has to find a place for it and have an organization and whatnot, that becomes really stressful. So, with your clients, how do you find that balance between being like, okay, yes, my kids are going to grow. They're going to need new sizes for clothes. They're going to want new toys. That's a part of growing up in many ways. And it's a blessing. But also, you can set some boundaries to be like, hey, like one gift per person, or please don't give me gifts at the birthday party, or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's when you are having boundaries, it is showing your self love and it's showing your family love. And it's showing your children that boundaries are okay, which is going to be a very important lesson in life. I'm not an expert on boundaries. I am still also reading the books. I'm also, in therapy, just like other people, like still trying to like learn and implement. So it's a work in progress. Know that. That's great. But I think that the more we can have these conversations with others, especially the folks where you are feeling a lot of tension, it's just important to know that they are not able to read your mind. Just like
Mm-hmm.
in our marriages and our relationships, that's something that my husband and I joke about all the time. Like, oh, that's right. Still not a mind reader. Forgot about that. No worries. Here is me communicating like what my needs are because you can't read my mind. Totally forgot about that. My bad. But it is important because they can't. And people's people are going to gravitate towards their own love language as far as
Mm-hmm.
what that is. So if their own love language is gift giving, they are going to express it in gifts. That being said, you can do them a big favor by letting them know what types of gifts are particularly helpful. So if that is clothing in the next size up around the holidays, if that is experiences, if that's a Zoom membership or pitching in for karate lessons or helping towards their summer camp or whatever the case may be, that's really helpful for the people in your life to know that that would be particularly useful. Because once you tell them that, many people are going to say, I obviously want to do the thing that like you're going to love the most because I love gift
Yeah.
giving. So people will gravitate towards that. That being said, you are going to have some people who will completely disregard that. And you need to understand that that's fine. You have expressed your boundaries. And if people aren't willing to listen or respect or honor that, you also don't have to just keep everything. It's fine if you express that you absolutely don't want any more toys and then they're gifting you a bunch of toys. You don't have to keep the toys.
Yeah.
And I know that's easy to say like on the front end once your child sees a toy like it's like, oh, and now we're
Yeah.
getting rid of it because I told grandma no. I know that that's a lot harder, but you can also work with your children on establishing how many toys is the right number for them. There's
Yeah.
something that I use with my clients all the time called the numbers rule. And this also goes hand in hand with what I call the space rule. And that is figuring out the right number of things for you. But it also can be why it goes hand in hand with the space rule is because the space might dictate how much is the right amount. So if it's enough toys that fit in your toy box, if it's enough stuffies that fit in the hammock, whatever the case may be, it could be
Hmm.
as even if kids are getting new toys, say, okay, well, as we've already discussed, like as you already know, as is how we do things around here, the amount of space we have to hold is XYZ. So if you end up getting more, then we can say, listen, you can either choose to keep it or maybe play with it for a week and then we let it go. Maybe, maybe it's not your favorite, or we can switch it out with something that you're not playing with so much and we can pass that along to a kid who really needs it. What do you think? And give your child autonomy over the choices while still keeping the boundaries for your household with how much is the right amount for you. And
Yeah.
the right amount for you may be different than the right amount for me, and that's okay. It's not like everyone should have 6 shirts, everyone should have 20 books. Like
Yeah.
it's not like that. You get to dictate what the right amount is for you.
Yeah, because we're all different people and we like different things. But I absolutely love that. And something that I tried to come back to too for me is that like everything has a spot. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's really what you're saying is like with the space and the numbers, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this many pairs of shoes. Well, once they no longer fit there, or once there's no longer a spot to put my shoes, or there's no longer a spot to put the kids' toys, then there need to be some choices. And then just from the kids' standpoint, like psychologically, we know that giving them choices is beneficial to their development and for, like you said, their autonomy and being able to allow themselves to be little humans to say, like, hey, you get to make the choice, like whatever you want to do, but like you can only have this many. So we got to get rid of two. Pick the two
Mm-hmm.
that you want to get rid of, and that's your choice, and helping them do that. And I've seen things where people do like trial periods too, right? Like they'll say, well, let's pick two for this week to get rid of. And then if the kids really miss that two, you bring them back in and they switch out for another two. But you give them like a time frame. You say, like, okay, by the end of this month, we're going to be getting rid of two of these. So you're going to have to pick this month which two you want to get rid of. And that can be a little overwhelming, I think, at first. But with any of this, having systems really benefits this, right? And so if you get in the practice of being like, okay, we only have this many of these things in this space, we know, okay, we have too much mail in our mail holder. We have to go through our mail. We have too many shoes. We have too many stuffies, whatever it is, that's the system of how you keep track of things. What are some other systems that people can implement in their home so it's less overwhelming and becomes more practical and practice of how they're just living their life?
Mm, I really do agree with you that like kind of having it doesn't have to be like one in, one out, but the awareness of how much you have and kind of having some boundaries around that, that's huge because going through the decluttering process, the point at which things click, like once people tell me things like, Someone recently told me, oh, I went on vacation, and I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but every time I went to the store, I was thinking to myself, okay, am I going to want this in 6 months? She's like, and I blame you.
Mm.
Honestly, I blame you for that. So thank you, I think, but I'm honestly not sure. And I was like, or somebody else recently is like, yeah, every time that I'm at the store, I'm thinking about, you know, what purpose is this going to serve longer than I think it's really cute and I want to bring it home right now? Because,
Mm.
and that's when everything clicks. Like once you have those moments where you're thinking about the future and not just like, oh, cute, get it, then that's what's going to be able to help you to maintain your systems long term. Um, I could I could talk endlessly about like a lot of different types of systems in different places, but I think that most of it really boils down to how much space am I willing to allot for this, and being cognizant of when things are starting to feel a little more chaotic, and being like,
Mm.
okay, it's time to thin it out. Like if your closet is stressing you, okay, maybe it's time to do a little closet detox. If your shoes are starting to pile up and pile out, this is was just one example, but recently in a client's home, we were looking to implement like a one main area where we could have a lot of what the family needed to just get started with their day and just streamline things, from, having hooks for the backpacks or cubby or whatever the space is, to the family calendar, to this is where my keys go, my purse, areas for shoes. And
Yeah.
something that we noticed, they're like, well, we do have these shoe systems, but they just keep getting really chaotic. And something that's hard in their house is that there's upstairs and downstairs, but they really were like, well, at the end of the day, they mostly wear 6 pairs of shoes each. And so what we're
Mm.
going to do is implement a system where each family member will have space for 6 pairs of shoes. And then the ones that aren't used as frequently, they're going to go in their closets because we can make room
Mm.
for them. And even though it's an upstairs, downstairs situation, if they're hardly using it, it doesn't need to be taking up a bunch of bandwidth in the spaces where they are using things all the time. That's a system I have at home with my shoes too. I have
Yeah.
the spot where we have the commonly used shoes. And then in my closet, I had, well, mostly had, because I recently detoxed my heels. I decided that I'm over it. Just like purged like all of my
Yeah.
heels. But I have like cute acrylic shoe boxes so I can see like my nice dressy shoes, and have like the handbags I almost never wear in, cute clear bins so that I can see them, but they're not getting dusty constantly, but I know
Yeah.
exactly where they are when I need them. And it's a pared down collection, but when I need it, it's there, it's dust free, it's ready to go, and it makes me very happy. But yeah, I think that's the basis of it, is just making sure that when things start to feel chaotic, that you have the foundation that you can go back to streamline and like reset your systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things that you reminded me of, going back a little bit, is it comes back to those 4 words that you keep saying, that use, want, need, love. But what is the purpose that this is going to serve? And I think, again, my brain goes to like little kids, but there are certain things that are going to serve like a 20-minute purpose, like
Mm-hmm.
face painting or whatever else, that it's going to be a memory you're going to have. It's not going to serve this long-term purpose. When you're talking about your clients like being on vacation, and it's like, okay, what is the purpose that's going to serve? There is this really fine balance between that, right? Because sometimes you may be quote unquote wasting that money or getting that thing that isn't going to serve a long purpose. And other times there's a better solution. And it reminded me of, we recently took our kids to Disney on Ice. It was something that we asked for experience gifts this year for our kids. We said we don't want things, we need experience gifts. And that we had a grandparent listen, and they got us tickets for Disney on Ice
So
for
nice.
birthday and Christmas. It was great. Now, of course, you get to, if you haven't been to something like this with kids or family member, there's all these vendors with
Yep.
all these things walking around, all these things that the kids are very attracted to and want, that are going to serve a very small purpose in
Mm-hmm.
life. And a lot of these like light up wands
Yeah.
and things like this. And so the kids are like, I want to light up wand. I want this. I want to go. And I was like, okay, well, let's go look and see what there is. And before we went to Disney on Ice, I was asking our kids, I was like, who are you most excited to see? Like, what's your favorite character? And to be honest, we don't watch like a ton of Disney movies or Disney shows. So I was actually really curious to see what they were going to say. But in this moment, it was Toy Story. He was so excited to see Toy Story and Buzz and Woody. And I was like, okay, cool. So we go and we look at the little vendor toys. And, you know, there's all these light up wands. And that's what most of the kids are getting. Most of the kids are walking away with these light up wands. And that was the first thing. Our oldest was like, I want one of those. And I was like, okay, well, we don't really have like a long-term purpose for that. Is there anything else that looks really cool to you? Do you like any of the other toys? And he was like, well, what if we got Buzz? And I was like, you know what? I can stand behind that. One, it was like almost a third of the cost of a light up wand. And I'm like, okay, this is something that's small. I know exactly where it's going to go in his room, like where it can go. It's something he can play with ongoing. And to me, it serves more of the memory of why we're there, because he talked about it going into it. And so it felt like a parenting win. I'm not going to lie. I was like, this is great. And then the little one was like, I want one. And so now we have Buzz and Woody, and they get to trade off and they get to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfect. Now, then there's vendors that are all the food, right? And they're walking around and they want like all these other things. And in the moment, yeah, I splurged on a milkshake for him to be super excited, and he gets that. But it's not the souvenir cup that I'm going to carry home with me. It's not that. It's not all these things. And it allows me to find places where I'm like, okay, where am I saying yes for right now, so that we are having like that memory and maybe that thing that we're taking home with us. But I'm shifting my choices a little bit so that I don't have a light up wand that's batteries died the next day that I'm carrying with me.
Totally.
And no offense, if you're listening, you're like, I always buy the light up wand. Like, that's great, but that doesn't bring me joy. So I was able to find a shift. So I just think that having those different versions of yes, and having you talk to your clients and say, hey, what would you think about differently with this? What is another way that that shows up for you? Less about kids, but like as a human, like as an adult, what are some decisions that you make differently when you're places now?
Okay, so we just got back from vacation. I know I told you before we started recording, this is like my first meeting back.
Yeah.
And
From Japan.
from
Like,
Japan.
so cool.
Thank you. I was like very, very, very grateful to have gone. And we started planning this in 2019. We were like, okay, we're going next year. And then it didn't work out. So very happy to be there because they just opened in October. But anyway, so we're coming back, and I'm an auntie to 7. So we had, a lot of like kids that we wanted to like buy cute things for. And we want to share some like fun cultural things with them too, right? So something that we end up doing, and one of my sisters started this because her husband is from Peru. So they go back to Peru like fairly regularly. And when they come back, they always bring snacks, which is great because it's like you're getting to taste something from a different culture and it's new and exciting, and then it's done. And it's not a bunch of stuff in your house. So we brought back in Japan, they have like Kit Kats, and we heard other people ahead of us in immigration. We were coming back in like, oh, did you buy anything? They're like, well, I got a lot of Kit Kats. Totally us. Not gonna lie, it was just like all the flavors of Kit Kats and some other different snacks too. But that's the bulk of what we brought back. We did bring back like some small gifts. It's like maybe like a small stuffy or like change purses. We ended up getting like 3 change purses. And then we have change that's left over from Japan, which is like fun and exciting. So we'll put change in each of the change purses too for the kids to like play with. And yeah, so, but the bulk of what we generally bring back for ourselves and for others is either edible or something you can use up, different foods, bring back coffee from other places for folks, chocolates. And I have, let's see, another gift I end up giving a lot to folks is like a local candle vendor that I use. They do custom refills, so you can do whatever scent you want and then like refill old candles. And so then I'll just like refill them and give those to people and stuff. And yeah, basically things that you can use up is what I generally am trying to think of, and or things that that person really wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's so much more intentional too, right? Where you're not just like, oh, I'm bringing this back because I bought you something. It's like, I'm bringing this back because I've thought through the use case of it, or I was reminded of you when I saw this, like
Yeah.
having more meaning behind it, not just like, oh, I bought you something to say I bought you something. Like, I absolutely hate when people buy me things and it's just like, so I could open something. I'm like, I would much rather us just like go on a walk together than you just give me something. And I think it comes back to, like you said, your love language and what that is. And my mom and I'm going to tell her to listen to this episode and be like, it was all about you. I'm just kidding. But she loves to buy our family things. And one year she was like, what do you want for Christmas? And I was like, I want a 9x13 Pyrex pan. And she's like, you are so boring to buy things for. And I was like, that's all I want. That's the only thing that's like on my list right now. And so she like listened, and I was like, doesn't it give you joy knowing that's like really all I want? And
Like,
more recently, she sent me a link from Amazon, and I was like, what are you buying us from Amazon? But when she was here last time, she was like, what are the things that you need for the kids? I was like, honestly, the only thing I wish we had for the kids right now were solid socks that were both their sizes that didn't have to be matched by the different colors. And that's all I want. And so then a week later, black socks show up for the kids. And I was like, I'm just so happy you're listening. And I will be honest, I don't think it gives her the same joy for her picking out her same things, but we try to have a balance. So it's like every other thing that she buys is like for her versus me. And so it's like, okay, we have that balance there. And so, but I think it's knowing, I do think she gets a little more joy knowing where I'm like, thank you. Like, you heard me. And I really appreciate that. And I think just having those really clear conversations. What are some of the ways that you guide your clients to do that, to have those conversations if it doesn't come as naturally to them? Or what are some ways you've done it yourself?
So that one's really hard, right? Because then sometimes I feel like you do end up getting into kind of like this therapy adjacent, friend adjacent thing. And talking to people about the tough stuff for them is tricky, right? But I think it's important to have these conversations, and so I feel very honored to be able to help folks guide those conversations and those changes in their life. I think that depending on the person that you end up talking to in your own life and like start having that switch, I think depending on the person, it can be like the level of difficulty is different. But the thing that the thing that I suggest for folks as they're starting is to just be open about where they're at and like their journey. So a great place to start is instead of waiting until December 1st, like say you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, instead of waiting till December 1st and then going to the grandparents and saying, hey, listen, I know usually you give me too many toys and like you need to stop. Like instead of approaching things from that point of view, maybe in October when someone says, how are you doing? You can say things like, you know what? We are on this decluttering journey right now, and we are just having so much fun with it. And it's just really helping us streamline things, but we're just kind of in this new mindset of experiences over getting new physical things. And it's really been making a big impact in our life. Like when you kind of are sharing your journey in that way, it can kind of set the tone. And then when people are asking you about it, or when it comes time to kind of like let people know, then you can reference that and say, hey, you know how I mentioned that we've been on this decluttering journey this year? It has me really thinking about the holidays. So I just wanted to reach out to the grandparents and let you know that this holiday season, we're hoping for XYZ. And kind of the invitation to be part of it is going to come across so much better than if you come at somebody in like attack mode, like you do this and I'm mad about this, but more of an invitation into being part of helping you reach your own goals. In the same way, and it goes hand in hand, it comes up a lot, is when people say like, what about my partner? Like my partner's not on the same page as me. That's a lot harder too, because you live in the same house. And so I always liken it to if you had started like a fitness journey if you say to your partner, like, hey, I have decided that I'm going to go to the gym. And also, I think that you are not looking so good. So you should come with me. And it's because you need to change. Like, that's not going to go over as well as if you are on this journey and they see how much fun you're having. And then they say, like, wow, sounds like you're having a lot of fun. And you say, I am having a lot of fun. You know what? I would love if you wanted to join me one of these days. We could have fun together. Like, that feels a lot different than accusatory. And so it's
Hmm.
really about inviting people in versus being on the defensive mode, if that makes sense. And I
Yeah.
think that any time that you can start it from that angle, you're going to have better luck with the conversation.
Yeah. And you just reminded me, like, my husband and I rarely do gifts for each other. It's really more of like a surprise and delight if we're thinking of each other. There's something we wanted, and that works really great for our relationship. If,
Hmm.
apply that where it fits for you if you're listening. But something that I love is when holidays do come up or there's things that we're celebrating, we have a conversation about, like, how do we want to celebrate? And
Mm.
because we know that for us, like, yes, probably go take the love language quiz. But for us, we know that that's not going to light either of us up, that we would much rather share an experience together than just exchange a gift. And that, we're doing that as a couple, but with you just sharing that, it also reminded me with the grandparents, I think that's how they kind of bought into the transition for the experiences, is they noticed we started doing more experiences with our kids and taking pictures. And they're like, well, I want to go with you guys to the zoo. Can we go to the
Hmm.
zoo? And then I was like, yeah, sure. Why don't we not do gifts, or we do one small gift and then let's go to the zoo as a family? And of course, there's limitations with maybe how mobile people are, what you can do, but there's a lot of really cool things that you can do. We took, our great grand, not great great great, one great grandma to a children's museum, and she got to watch the kids there. And I think it's just being in this like creative mindset of like, how could we do this and this would feel
Hmm.
good. But that being said, I actually want to transition back a little bit to like being overwhelmed, because
Yeah.
all of this stuff we're talking about is great in concept, right? But then you get overwhelmed and you're just like, I don't know, this sounds overwhelming. I don't want to have these conversations. I don't know how to take action. So, like, what is the first step that someone can take when they're like, I have a lot of stuff, I feel overwhelmed, I'm always getting new stuff? What is the first step to do to declutter?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, feels counterintuitive, but just go with me. First step, you can take a deep breath. And sometimes I end up starting sessions with like a little bit of a sit down, like we're sitting down, we're chatting. We do a little bit of breath work. We've definitely, and I'm not like, I'm a breath work expert and this is my process. It's not like that. It's just if a client feels, if I can tell that they're particularly frantic on a day, I might suggest that we just start with a few deep breaths, maybe a little water break while I set up, and then, okay, let's get started.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to come into the process while you're feeling frantic. And if anyone's interested, and I'm happy to send you the link if you like, there have been studies that have been done on the link between clutter and your cortisol levels. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they are scientifically linked, and it's not just in your head. Clutter is stressful. So I suggest to folks maybe sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and a nice beverage, preferably something with water in it. And you can just hydrate a little and think about the area. I would say up to three. Think about the spaces in your home that are stressing you the F out. What is stressing you out the most? And we're going to list those. Bonus points if it's a space that helps you, because especially as busy parents, your natural inclination is to think about everybody else and their needs before your own. And so if there is a space that can help you specifically in the day to day, and I'm just going to say it, and not necessarily everybody else, but putting yourself first and putting on that oxygen mask on first, getting that space in order is going to give you the inspiration and like help with that snowball effect of wanting you to work in other spaces. If your space if your space feels particularly sentimental, or like, and has a lot of those especially tough decisions, then maybe start in some place that's easier and less sentimentally driven. For some people, that could be a place like a pantry or a bathroom, generally has less sentimental items, but depending on your like traumas and things, sometimes those spaces can be especially difficult. So everybody knows when they're going through their spaces what's going to be a little less emotional for them, and that can be an easier place to start. Decluttering is like flexing a muscle. So as you go, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. So starting with kind of like the easy things can be a good way to be like, okay, I'm getting into decision mode. So basically, I want you to start, I want you to make a list of the 3 spaces, and like as you're writing it down, even leave some space. So 1, leave some space. 2, leave some space. Number 3. Then I want you to break down in those spaces what is bugging you, but like into teeny tiny little spots. So say in your bedroom, instead of working on like the bedroom as a whole, I want you to work on like your bedside table as one, underneath your bed, the pile at the foot of your bed, all the clothes on that chair. Break your section down into spots, break your dresser down into different chunks, like maybe one drawer at a time, because it's going to be so much easier for you to declutter one small space in like 20 minutes, maybe a
Mm-hmm.
post bedtime, before you go to bed. It's when you can break it down into small chunks that you can easily fit into your schedule and cross that off your list, you're going to be more inclined to be like, okay, actually, you know what? That wasn't so bad. Now I can do it again tomorrow. And so
Yeah.
breaking it down into the teeny tiny little chunks is going to be key. I also suggest having accountability, somebody that you can talk to about it, someone you can set goals with. Online groups can be helpful, a friend, just basically having people that can cheer you on, because it can get really discouraging, and having the support, even in forms of podcasts, like while you're decluttering, listening to inspirational podcasts and things, it can be more helpful than you realize along the way.
Yeah, I love that. So we've talked a lot about like the mindset behind decluttering, and we've talked a lot about just like how to take action on yourself, your spaces, whatnot. But so often when people go to organize or declutter, kind of like how we started, the difference between those, the first thing they think of is a clear bin.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so before we wrap up today, I'd love for to talk about like the cost of organizing, how so many people don't even get started because they're like, I don't want to spend $20 per bin to be able to just make my house look good. And like a part of that is clear bins aren't for everyone's mind. Like not
Mm-hmm.
everyone's brain likes to see clear bins. I am one of the people, I love clear bins, but that's not
Mm-hmm.
for everyone. So I'd love for you to just talk about like the cost of, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars to get organized, and your version of organizing may not be the same as someone else's.
100%. And a big, like when you get into like the big mistakes that I see people make when they get started decluttering and organizing, number one is starting at the store. Because to my point earlier, until you've decluttered a space, you're not going to be exactly sure on what you need and what you don't need. So I highly recommend decluttering first, because then you're going to be able to see more clearly what systems are actually going to be helpful to you. Going back to the instance with my client and all of her leather goods, if I had looked at my space and made a plan around that, I would have a bunch of purse storage that wouldn't have ended up using. So I'm glad that we
Yeah.
start with decluttering and then make a plan from that. So as you're decluttering, these are just kind of like some tips that I use when I'm decluttering, like super fast. I always have 3 bins with me with my clients. Mine are trash cans that I've labeled and just stack and bring to all the sessions. But one is trash, one's recycling, and one is donations. So as you're grabbing an item, you can, if it's like keep or not, and if it's not, is it trash, recycling, donation? If it's a keep, then I suggest categorizing as you keep. So in a kitchen, that might mean like, okay, putting all your spatulas together and like all those little utensils. It could mean putting all of your coffee cups together, all of your plates, whatever the case may be. In a bedroom, that could be, okay, I'm putting my shorts together, I'm putting all my sweaters together, and that sort of thing. Then when you have your keeps, you see how much you have. So at that point, you might see, oh, wow, I have 25 pairs of black skinny jeans. Is that the right number for me? And for some people, that's a yes. And for other people, they're like, holy crap, how did I get so many black pairs of skinny jeans? And so then you can look at that and say, okay, what's the right number for me? Maybe that's 10, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Again, the right number is going to be up to you. From there, you can make a plan. Once you have a plan, kind of an idea in mind, then you can measure your space. Then you can shop for what you need. So then when you're shopping, you're actually going to use that stuff. Getting back to your point, a lot of it is kind of like it's like emotional ergonomics. Like you kind of have to go with what feels good and what feels right to the way that works for your brain. A case in point, I had a client I was working with. This was a few months ago, and she's a teenager and she has ADHD. And so we were working on her room because we wanted to create systems that she was going to be more likely to keep up. And she had a closet system, but we just needed to tweak it a little bit in the way that it was presented and just the flow and where the shelves were and this sort of thing. And then we needed to get some bins. And we were talking about bins. Her mom had shown me an example video of a closet that she really liked. And we watched it with the daughter too. And she noted like, oh, I really like those bins that they have in the video because they have little slits in them. So she's like, you can kind of see, but it's also mostly solid. So it won't be distracting because my closet is open. She's like, for me, that would work better because I think that the clear bins are going to be too distracting to me while I'm trying to get my homework done. And I'm like, well, fantastic. And since I am a dork, I know exactly what bins those are. So let's just go ahead and get those bins. So we did, and they worked great. We've got labels on them. And because she had that buy-in on what's going to work best for her and had that input, she's kept it up longer than she's kept up systems in the past, which is amazing. And like, all my dreams come true. But I feel like I went on a tangent and then forgot the question.
No, I think that's perfect because it's, you're looking at different systems for different people and allowing yourself to not just, organization's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
So, it could be counterproductive because then you're looking at things and you're like, oh, well, I implemented the system. Like, why do I not feel better? Why do I feel more distracted? Why does my room not feel good? And it's like, well, that system just might not be for you. That doesn't mean you should go back to clutter, but that means that you look at a different system.
Yeah. And a place that this comes into play, two quick examples. One is with the trend right now of decanting everything in your pantry. Like people send me like Kardashian pantries and stuff. And they're like, oh, this is so beautiful. And it's like, yes, it is. And you also just need to remember that this person has a staff member who decants everything as it comes in and makes it like beautiful and perfect. As busy parents, most people don't want to spend the time to decant all the crackers as they come in. Now, if you do, more power to you, do it. But that's the thing that I ask people about as we're talking about, like the question that gets asked all the time is, what is the best way? And like, I'm doing this in air quotes if you're just listening, but the best way is going to be the system that is easy enough for you to maintain on a regular basis. If that means you're not decanting everything and you've got everything in the cardboard boxes, don't worry about it, babe. Don't worry about it. You're doing a great job. You're doing great. And the other example I was going to give is that I was thinking about this as I was unpacking the other day. In my own drawer that has like my socks, underwear, bras, and then a few nightgowns that I use like all the time, I still have shoe boxes in there. Not like the acrylic nice shoe boxes, like the ones that my shoes came in from, wherever, because it fits really well. Everything's divided how I need it and it hasn't broken. So I've been using these shoe boxes for like 5 years. And I'm like, you know what? No shame, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it doesn't need to cost a ton to be a system that can work if it works for you.
Yeah. So good. All right, as we wrap up, that's like a great transition. I didn't realize how affordable it was to get an organizer to support you and be a part of your life. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how people can connect with you, where they can find you on the internet and social media, and just like having that fact of like how they can reach out to you, because I think so often people hear this and they're like, gosh, that just sounds so overwhelming, or I'm not sure where to start. And while we answered some of those questions, and Carly also has a page in the Mama House Goals app that can help get you started, really, if you're looking to take that next step, don't be scared to ask, like, what would that look like? And that you can also do virtual consultations. Like,
Yeah.
so many people think that you need to have the home edit come into your house and like redo your entire house in rainbow books. And that's beautiful and great if that's the way you want your house to look. But there is an in between, and you can
Yeah.
get a little bit of support without having to have this whole like staff member and organizing and all of that. So I just want to also just like kind of debunk that for anyone listening is there's all different levels of support, whether you take action from this podcast, which I hope you do because there's so much value here. Then you can tap into some of the free resources Carly has in the app, her own podcast. You can share about some of the other ways they can tap in. And then get on a consultation, get on a virtual consultation and or in person if you're in the Sacramento area. But if you are virtual, tap in and be like, hey, I have this one specific thing that's really stressing me out, or my whole house is stressing me out. But
Mm-hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, you can really help them identify a win. You can say, all right, let me help you guide what your win would be when it comes to decluttering and organizing. So how can they work with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So you can find me online at tidyrevival.com. I'm on all the socials at Tidy Revival as well. Facebook, Instagram's probably our biggest one. Pinterest, ton of resources there, and TikTok as well. As far as ways to work with me, we do have a number of price points because like not everybody wants to work in the same way. Some folks really do want that hands-on organization. So I'm in client homes every week, working alongside of them and helping. It's mostly working with people to give them the skills so that they can move forward on their own versus a done for you situation. Everybody works a little bit different. But again, my folks are generally overwhelmed with too much stuff. So we want to work on how to reduce it and how to have that skill set and that toolkit that they can take with them later. I do work with folks online only as well. So if people want to work together to create an action plan and then have an accountability partner so that they can check in on what they've done, where they're stuck, chat through it, and figure out simple solutions that are going to work for them in their home. I work with folks on an ongoing basis in that way, or a one-time strategy session just to check in about what is stressing you out and how you can make the changes. And we talk about possible systems that you can implement as well. And then we do have a private community, which is the most affordable way to work with us. And we are currently revamping that, and it'll be relaunching early summer this year.
That is so exciting. And so when you hear this go live, it'll be right around that time frame. And I think that's so amazing because obviously at Mama Has Goals, we're big advocates for community and
Mm-hmm.
how important it is to have people working on the same goals as you. So allowing yourself to be connected. Well, Carly, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see what that community evolves to. Can't wait to check in with you for myself for some new decluttering and organization. I need to up level some things. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey. It was great chatting with you.